Welcome back to Nancy Ellen Quilts. I'm going to show you how to create a double fold French binding, which is the penultimate step to quilt making. The final step, of course, is putting on your label. The reason I use this binding is because of the double fold, it provides lots of protection against wear. In order to create the binding, the first step is to decide how long your binding strips need to be to cover the perimeter of your quilt. You can see with this quilt, it's approximately 20 inches by 20 by 20 by 20, so I would need 2, 4, 6, 80 inches plus another 6 inches, so about 86 inches of binding strips to complete this quilt. The first step in creating the binding strips is to cut these strips 2 1/4 inches wide, as I demonstrated in the rotary cutting basics video. Long enough strips. As you see here, I already joined these two together, and I'm going to show you how to join another one together. To join your strips together, you start by laying out one strip right side up on your sandboard. The other strip will lie perpendicular to that, right sides together, so you cause these 90-degree angles. Using a see-through ruler, I line up my 45-degree line along the bottom strip, and if the camera could look over the top, you could see it's lining up perfectly in these corners, and if it doesn't, I just make an adjustment. The pencil line will go from this corner to this corner. And I'll make my line. This is my sewing line. And with your pins, you can see I keep them handy. Pin that in place and secure it with another pin. And then with the same color thread, so you don't see the seam. Did you see that? The thread matches the fabric. I always sew with the thread that matches the fabric. I'm using my thimble. I'm now going to sew right up this line. So I sewed right on that line. I'm going to create a knot about 1/4 inch from the end. Just a simple loop. And with my scissors, I'm going to cut that. Remove the pins. Add 1/4 inch seam allowance away from that line, so I can cut away the excess fabrics. With my scissors, I just cut these 2 pieces away. I don't need those. And when I open this up, see how they join perfectly together. The next step, now that your strips are all sewn together, is to open the seams and just finger press them in the open position right on your sandboard. So again, you open the seam up and just finger press it like that. With the right side facing you, now that the whole strip is sewn together and your seams are pressed open, add 1/4 inch sewing line to the top, only on one side, like that. And you'll do this all the way down the entire strip. Just as I think of it as I'm adding my 1/4 inch sewing line, I just want to remind everyone that you do not need to cut your fabric on the bias. You need to cut it on the straight. The only time you're going to cut your binding on the bias is when you're adding a binding that has curves in it or points. This is a straight binding, and you're just going to cut it on the straight grain. If you don't know what a bias is, a bias is when you cut the fabric on the diagonal across the grain. You can see on this side of the fabric, if you're not looking at the stripes, if you just get a close-up of the fabric itself. When you pull the fabric on the straight way, there's some give in this direction, there's no give in this direction. But if you pull it on the diagonal, there's a lot of give, and that's the bias. The binding strip is now complete with a 1/4 inch sewing line. And the next step is to take it and wrong sides together. We're going to iron it in half, the entire strip. Wrong sides together. So I'm going to start down here and just start ironing the whole strip in half. And if you have cats, they love binding strips. Although my cats are sleeping right now. It's still daytime. You see I'm folding the binding strip together in half. The wrong side of the fabric is the side that you don't want to see. The right side is the pretty side with the print on it. If you're using a solid for this, there may be no wrong or right side. And here we have the completed binding strip as it's ready to be applied to your quilt edge.